Our own son pushed us to the edge of the cliff. Get lost! The words still echoed in my ears like funeral bells. Hours later, I was having dinner on the private terrace of an 8-star resort, but the most expensive wine in the world couldn't wash away the bitter taste of betrayal. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd tell. And if you, for a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. You'll be helping me continue to unburden myself. My name is Teresa Miller, and I am 68 years old. This morning, I woke up in the house I helped pay for, in the Pasadena neighborhood of Los Angeles, where the jacarandas bloom every June, and where I thought I would grow old surrounded by the love of my family. My husband Matthew and I had lived there for 5 years, ever since we sold our family home to help our son Ethan with his digital design company. The navy blue dress I wear to church on Sundays hung pressed in the closet, next to the floral dress my daughter-in-law Jessica gave me last year for my birthday. A gift I now understand was an elegant way of telling me how I should dress so as not to embarrass them in front of their modern friends. My hands, marked by the veins that betray years of work at the family dry cleaners, trembled slightly as I prepared breakfast. The kitchen smelled of freshly brewed coffee and pastries from the corner bakery, the cinnamon rolls that Ethan used to love as a child. Every morning for these 5 years, I would get up at 6 to have everything ready for when he came down to eat before work. It was my way of showing him that, even though we were no longer the owners of the house, we were still useful, still contributing something valuable to his life. Matthew was reading the newspaper at the dining room table, his reading glasses balanced on the tip of his nose as they always did when he was focused on the sports section. At 72, he still had that natural elegance that I fell in love with 45 years ago, when he worked as an accountant at the textile mill where I handled my father's books. His completely white hair was combed back with the same pomade he'd used since he was young, and his beige shirt was impeccably ironed, because I still took care of his clothes as if we were newlyweds. "Good morning, my love," he whispered as I passed by to pour his coffee. That daily phrase, repeated for decades, now sounded different, laden with a sadness that neither of us dared to mention. The phone rang at 9:15. "Ethan. Mom, I need you and Dad to come down to the garden. We need to talk." His tone was cold, corporate, as if he were about to fire an employee. It wasn't the tone of the little boy who cried in my arms when he had nightmares, nor the teenager who asked me for advice about girls in high school, nor the young adult who hugged me every Mother's Day, telling me I was the best mom in the world. We walked down the stairs slowly. I was wearing my light blue housecoat, the one Matthew gave me last year with little yellow flowers embroidered on the pockets. My pink slippers made a soft sound against the marble steps that I religiously cleaned every Tuesday and Friday. Ethan was waiting for us in the garden, standing next to the orange tree we planted together when he moved into this house. He was wearing a white linen shirt and black slacks that I knew cost more than my entire monthly Social Security check. His brown hair was perfectly styled with gel, and his meticulously trimmed beard gave him that successful 35-year-old entrepreneur look he loved to project. Jessica stood beside him, elegant as always in an emerald green dress that highlighted her light eyes. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves over her shoulders. Her flawless nails were painted nude, and she carried a designer handbag that cost more than our grocery bill for 3 months. Everything about her screamed money and class, everything I could never give my son, but that he had achieved for himself. "Sit down," Ethan said, pointing to the 2 wrought iron chairs by the garden table. We sat like scolded children, hands in our laps, hearts pounding without knowing why. "Jessica and I have been talking," he began, avoiding my gaze. "We think it's time for you to find your own space." The words hung in the air like dead leaves. I couldn't fully process them. "Our own space?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Yes, Mom. We've been living together for 5 years now. Jessica wants to start a family. We need privacy. We need freedom to live our own lives without—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Without constant supervision." "Supervision?" I repeated, the word hitting me in the chest. "Son, we never—" "Mom, please, you're always there. Always commenting on the decor, on the food we buy, on our schedules. Jessica feels uncomfortable in her own home." I looked at my daughter-in-law, hoping to find some compassion in her eyes, some sign that this wasn't what she truly wanted. But her gaze was fixed on her perfect nails, as if the conversation had nothing to do with her. "Ethan," Matthew intervened in a firm voice. This house is mine, Dad. It's in my name. You helped me with the down payment, yes, and I'm very grateful for that. But legally, financially, it's my house." The blow was brutal. 5 years ago, when Ethan proposed we move in with him, he presented it as a partnership, as if we were building something together. We sold our family home, the house where he grew up, where we celebrated his birthdays, where he took his first steps, where he learned to ride a bike. We sold everything to give him the down payment for this bigger, more modern house in the neighborhood he wanted. "I have some contacts who manage some very nice senior living communities," he continued, pulling his phone from his pocket. "Places with activities, medical care, people your own age. I think you'd be happier there." Happier? Happier away from him? Happier surrounded by strangers instead of the family we had raised and sacrificed everything to keep together? "Son," I murmured, feeling my voice break. "We don't want to go to a nursing home. It's not a nursing home, Mom. They're modern communities with all the amenities." "I don't care what you call them," I exploded, surprising myself with my own volume. "They're places to dump old people who are no longer useful." Ethan sighed, as if my reaction was exactly what he expected, as if I were a petulant child who didn't understand adult matters. "Mom, please don't make this any harder than it already is." "Harder for whom?" I asked, tears beginning to cloud my vision. "Harder for you? Harder for her?" Jessica finally looked up. Her green eyes pierced me with coldness. "Teresa, we think this will be better for everyone. You'll have your space, we'll have ours. It's the healthiest thing to do." The healthiest thing? Was it healthy to break up a family? Was it healthy to discard the parents who had given everything for their children as if they were old furniture that no longer matched the new decor? Silence stretched for several minutes. The only sounds were the water from the garden fountain and the distant traffic on the freeway. Matthew took my hand in his. His fingers, which had always been my refuge, trembled as much as mine. "All right," he finally said, in a voice I didn't recognize. "All right, son. If that's what you want, we'll figure something out." "Dad, don't think we're kicking you out. We just think you are kicking us out," I shouted, standing up so abruptly that the iron chair wobbled. "That's exactly what you're doing. You're throwing us out like we're deadbeat tenants." "Mom, lower your voice. The neighbors, to hell with the neighbors, and to hell with all of it." For the first time in my life, I had cursed in front of my son. For the first time in 68 years, I had completely lost my composure. Ethan exchanged a look with Jessica, one of those knowing glances between partners that excludes the rest of the world. "I think this confirms it's the right decision," he muttered. We went up to our room in silence, like two condemned criminals. The hallway that once felt cozy now seemed endless, each step on the hardwood floor echoing like a mocking taunt. Our bedroom, which Jessica had always criticized for being too cluttered with my family photos and embroidered tablecloths, now looked like a museum of memories no one else valued. I sat on the edge of the bed, the queen-sized bed we bought 15 years ago when we still had our own house, when we still believed we would grow old surrounded by grandchildren who would visit on Sundays. Matthew went to the closet and began pulling out the dusty suitcases we had stored since our last move. The sound of the zippers opening transported me to another time, to other packings, but those had been filled with hope. I vividly remembered the day we decided to sell the family home. Ethan was 30 and had just graduated from USC with his master's in digital design. He came home that September afternoon with his eyes shining with excitement, carrying a bottle of red wine and a folder full of papers. "Mom, Dad, I have an incredible proposal," he had said, spreading the documents on the dining room table where I had served thousands of family dinners. "I found the perfect house in Pasadena. 3 stories, a garden, a 2-car garage. We can live together but each with our own space. It'll be the best of both worlds." He showed me the pictures. A modern house with huge windows, marble floors, a gourmet kitchen that looked like it was out of a magazine. It was everything I had dreamed of but never dared to wish for. The problem is the down payment, he had continued, chewing on his lower lip as he did when he was a kid and nervous. I need $250,000. If you sell this house and put that money in, I'll handle all the monthly payments. You'll never have to worry about a mortgage or maintenance costs again. Matthew and I looked at each other. Our house in Burbank wasn't much. 2 small bedrooms, 1 bathroom that always had plumbing issues, a kitchen where 2 people could barely fit. But it was ours. We had raised Ethan there, cried there when I lost my second pregnancy, celebrated every one of our son's achievements there. Think about it, Ethan had insisted, filling our wine glasses. Imagine waking up every day in that house. Mom, you'd have a kitchen where you could invite all your sisters to bake holiday cookies without bumping into each other. Dad, you'd have a study where you could do your accounting in peace. The seduction worked. Over the next few weeks, Ethan took us to see the house 3 times. With each visit, I fell more in love. The garden where I could plant my geraniums and herbs, the spacious living room where we could put my mother's piano, the master bedroom on the 2nd floor with its own bathroom and a walk-in closet bigger than our entire current living room. Besides, he had added on one of those visits, putting his arm around my shoulders as we looked at the orange tree in the garden. When I get married and have kids, you'll be right here to help me. The grandkids will grow up with their grandparents. Isn't that what you always wanted, Mom? Yes, that was exactly what I had always wanted. The sale of our house was finalized in 2 months. We got $260,000, and we gave him the entire $250,000 for the down payment on the Pasadena house. We didn't keep a single dollar for ourselves. You won't need it, Ethan had assured us. I'll take care of everything now. But the memories of generosity didn't end there. As I folded my clothes and packed them into the suitcase, my mind continued to travel back in time, stopping at every moment we had shown our unconditional love. 2 years after we moved in, Ethan came home one night looking devastated. His digital design company, which he had started with such enthusiasm, was on the verge of bankruptcy. A major client had canceled a huge contract after months of work, and he had invested all his capital in the project. I need $75,000, he had confessed that night, sitting in the kitchen while I made him chamomile tea to calm him down. If I don't get it within a week, I'll have to close the company and lay off my 5 employees. I had exactly that amount. It was my entire life savings from working at the dry cleaners, money I had saved dollar by dollar for 30 years for my old age, for medical emergencies, so I wouldn't be a burden to anyone when I got older. Take whatever you need, son, I said without hesitation, going to the cabinet where I kept my bank book. Your future is more important than my security, Ethan cried that night. He hugged me like he hadn't since he was a teenager and said, Mom, I promise I'll pay you back every single cent. You're the best mom in the world. He never paid me back, and I never asked him to. 6 months later, it was Matthew's turn to open his wallet. Ethan needed money for new equipment for his office. 5 high-end computers, specialized software, a professional printer. It's an investment, Dad. With this equipment, I'll be able to compete with the big agencies. Matthew liquidated his 401k, $100,000 he had saved over 25 years working as an accountant at the textile mill. Money he planned to use to travel with me across the country when he retired, to see the Grand Canyon and the beaches of Florida I had always dreamed of visiting. Don't worry, Dad, Ethan had said, signing a promissory note that remains unpaid to this day. In 6 months, I'll pay you back with interest. But the requests for help weren't limited to money. For these 5 years, I had become the unpaid housekeeper. I got up at 6 in the morning to make breakfast. I washed, ironed, and folded Ethan and Jessica's clothes. I cleaned all 3 floors of the house every Tuesday and Friday. I did the grocery shopping with my own pension money when their funds were tight. On Saturdays, when Ethan and Jessica went out with their friends to fancy restaurants or trendy clubs, Matthew and I would stay home and watch the house as if we were security guards. It just gives us peace of mind knowing you're here, Jessica would say. We don't have to worry about break-ins. On Sundays, I would cook for Ethan's guests, his partners, his clients, his friends from college. I'd prepare a standing rib roast that took all afternoon. A brisket I'd have to get up at 4 in the morning to start smoking. Ethan received all the praise. Your mom is an amazing cook, his guests would tell him. You're so lucky. But he never thanked me. It was as if my work was invisible, as if the food magically appeared on the table without anyone having invested hours of effort to prepare it. I vividly remembered last Christmas. I had spent my entire December Social Security check on gifts for the whole family: an expensive tablet for Ethan, a pearl necklace for Jessica, toys for my niece's children who were coming for dinner on the 24th. I had cooked for 3 days: a roasted turkey, scalloped potatoes, green bean casserole, homemade eggnog, Christmas cookies. The house smelled glorious, decorated with ornaments I had bought and embroidered tablecloths my mother had passed down to me. That night, as the whole family ate and laughed around the table I had set with my best china, Jessica made a comment that scarred my soul. "Ethan, we should really hire a catering service next year. That way your mom won't get so tired." She didn't say, "So your mom can enjoy dinner with us more." She didn't say, "So Teresa can relax at her own celebration." She said, "So she won't get tired," as if I were an appliance that might break down from overuse. Ethan nodded without even looking at me. "You're right. She's getting too old to be cooking for so many people. Too old." As if my 68 years were a disease. As if the same 68 years I had dedicated to caring for him, loving him, and sacrificing for him were now an inconvenience to his social life. That night, as I cleared the dirty dishes and packed up the leftovers, I realized my son no longer saw me as his mother. He saw me as the housekeeper who had served her purpose and was now ready to be replaced by more efficient professional services. Now, packing my belongings like a refugee in my own home, all those memories crowded in my chest like stab wounds. Every item of clothing I folded reminded me of an occasion where I had shown my unconditional love. Every photograph I wrapped in newspaper showed me happy moments that had apparently only been important to me. Matthew came over and sat beside me on the bed. His eyes were red, but his expression was serene, resigned. "When did we lose our son?" he asked, his voice cracking. I didn't know how to answer, because the truth was, our son was never lost. He had simply decided he no longer needed us. The next 2 weeks were an agony disguised as normalcy. Ethan and Jessica acted as if nothing had happened, as if the conversation in the garden had been a mere suggestion rather than an eviction notice. But there was something different in the air, an invisible poison that seeped into every daily interaction. During breakfast, Jessica started making seemingly innocent comments that pierced my soul like fine needles. "Teresa, don't you think this kitchen feels a little small for so many people?" she'd say while spreading jam on her whole wheat toast, the expensive kind she bought at the organic market in Beverly Hills. "Sometimes I don't even have room to make my morning smoothie." I had been making breakfast in that same kitchen for 5 years without any problems, but now, according to her, I was in the way. "Jessica's right," Ethan would add without looking up from his iPad, where he obsessively checked his business's social media. "We need to optimize our spaces. It's part of modern living. Optimize." As if I were a misplaced object blocking the efficient flow of their home, the comments multiplied like a plague. When I watered my geraniums in the garden, Jessica would sigh dramatically. "Ugh, those plants just ruin the whole aesthetic of the landscaping." "Ethan, couldn't we hire a professional gardener who understands modern design?" When Matthew watched the news on the living room TV, she would complain about the volume. "We prefer ambient music. The noise from the television disrupts our domestic harmony." Our harmony. As if we were intruders in a sacred temple. But the worst came the following Tuesday, on my birthday. 69 years of existence that I thought we would celebrate as a family, as we always had. I got up early, hoping that maybe, on this special day, things would go back to how they were. I made my favorite coffee and sat in the garden by the orange tree, waiting for someone to remember what day it was. The hours passed like thick honey. Matthew was at the doctor's for a routine blood pressure checkup he had scheduled weeks ago, forgetting the date. At 2 in the afternoon, Ethan came downstairs in his gray pinstripe suit, the one he wore for important meetings. He smelled of that expensive cologne Jessica had given him for Christmas, a fragrance that cost more than my food budget for an entire month. "Mom, Jessica and I are having lunch with some potential investors," he informed me while adjusting his tie in the foyer mirror. "It's a huge opportunity to expand the company." "Okay, son," I replied. swallowing my hope like a bitter pill. "What time will you be back? I could make something special for—" "We don't know when we'll be back. It could be very late. Don't wait up." They left without remembering it was my birthday. Without a hug, without a "have a good day," without even a "see you later." As if I were a piece of furniture they no longer noticed as they passed by. I was left alone in that enormous house, surrounded by luxuries I had helped pay for, but that didn't belong to me, with the echo of my own footsteps as my only company. I went to the kitchen and made myself a chamomile tea, trying not to think about past birthdays when Ethan would arrive with flowers and a chocolate cake from my favorite bakery. When Matthew returned from the doctor at 6, he found me crying silently in the kitchen. "What's wrong, my love?" he asked, approaching with the genuine concern he always had for me. "It's my birthday," I whispered, feeling foolish for having to remind him. "And our son didn't even remember." Matthew's face went pale. He took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes wearily. "Oh, Teresa, forgive me. With the doctor's appointment and all this stress, I forgot too." That night we ate alone. 2 invisible old people at a table set for 6. Matthew had rushed to the corner bakery and bought a small cheesecake, my favorite. It had no fancy decorations or numbered candles, but it tasted of true love. "Happy 69th, my queen," he said, kissing my forehead tenderly. Ethan and Jessica arrived at 11 o'clock. We heard them laughing at the door, talking loudly about how well their business dinner had gone, about the contracts they would probably secure, about the ridiculously expensive restaurant where they had eaten. They never came up to say hello. They never asked how we were. They never remembered they had forgotten the birthday of the woman who gave life to one of them. In the following days, the microaggressions continued with greater intensity. Jessica began to complain about the smell of home cooking, which, she claimed, clung to her designer dresses. "Cooking with so many spices is just so traditional. We prefer cleaner food, more organic." Cleaner. As if my 30 years of seasoning were filth. Ethan backed every one of his wife's comments with the silent complicity of someone who has chosen a side. When I mentioned I needed to buy ingredients for dinner, he would sigh with annoyance. "Mom, I already told you. You can use the organic meal delivery service. It's easier for everyone. Easier for them." For me to disappear from the kitchen I had considered my own for 5 years. The last straw came the following Friday. I had invited my 2 sisters, Hope and Connie, to lunch on Sunday, as we did once a month since moving to Pasadena. It was our sacred ritual. They would bring dessert, I would cook a pot roast, and we would spend the afternoon catching up on neighborhood gossip and remembering our parents. When I told Ethan about the family lunch, his reaction was brutal. "Mom, you can't just invite people over anymore without checking with us first. This is our house, not a restaurant." "They're my sisters," I retorted, feeling indignation rise in my throat. "They've been coming on the last Sunday of every month for 5 years. Well, this will have to be the last time. Jessica and I need our Sundays for ourselves. Besides, your sister Hope is very—" He paused, searching for the exact word. "Loud. You can hear her laugh all the way upstairs." "Loud?" I repeated, incredulous. "My sister is loud for laughing with her own family?" "They just don't understand the dynamic of this house," Jessica intervened, appearing in the kitchen like an elegant apparition. "We value tranquility, harmony. Shouting and shrill laughter disrupt our equilibrium." Equilibrium. As if my family were an earthquake threatening their picture-perfect life. That night, I had to call my sisters to cancel the lunch. Hope, who is 72 and has a bad hip, had already bought all the ingredients to make her famous coffee cake. Connie, 75, had cleared her entire Sunday to be with me. "But why, Teresa?" Hope asked over the phone, her confused voice breaking my heart. Did we do something wrong? Did we bother Ethan? I didn't know what to tell her. How do you explain that your own son has made you a prisoner in the house you helped buy? How do you admit that you no longer have the right to invite your own family over? "No, sis, you didn't do anything wrong. It's just, Ethan has a lot of work and needs quiet to concentrate." The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. After hanging up, I sat on the bed, and for the first time in 5 years, I let the rage course through my veins like boiling lava. It wasn't just sadness I felt. It was a deep fury, an indignation that I had been suppressing under layers of motherly love and justifications. When had I allowed them to treat me this way? At what point had I agreed to become invisible in my own life? How had I gotten to the point where I needed permission to invite my sisters, to cook my favorite food, to take up space in a house I had helped purchase? Matthew came into the room and found me trembling with rage. "I can't take it anymore," I confessed. My voice choked. "I don't recognize my son, and what's worse, I don't recognize myself. What do you want to do?" he asked, sitting beside me. For the first time in weeks, an idea began to form in my mind. A crazy, impulsive idea, completely out of character, but also liberating. "Do you remember that magazine I was reading last month? The one with the article about resorts in Napa Valley?" Matthew nodded, confused. "There was one that really caught my eye. Auberge du Soleil. It said they had special packages for seniors in the off-season. Teresa, what are you thinking?" I stood up and went to the nightstand where I kept my important papers. At the bottom of the drawer was the wrinkled magazine, opened to the page I had bookmarked weeks ago, when I still thought it was just an impossible dream. "I'm thinking maybe it's time to disappear," I said, feeling the word disappear take on a completely different flavor than it had in my son's mouth. "But not in the way they want," I added, looking Matthew straight in the eye, "but in the way we decide." On Monday morning, I made a decision that surprised even myself. While Ethan and Jessica ate breakfast in silence, absorbed in their respective phones as usual, I served the coffee with the same dedication as always. But inside, something had irrevocably changed. "Good morning," I said in a clear voice, louder than usual. Ethan mumbled something incomprehensible without looking up from his screen. Jessica didn't even bother to respond, busy photographing her bowl of organic granola for her social media. I remained standing by the table, waiting. The silence spread like an oil slick, heavy and thick. Finally, Ethan looked up with annoyance. "What is it, Mom? Do you need something?" "I just wanted to know how you slept," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "If you slept well, if you have plans for the day." Jessica sighed with exaggerated patience, as if my question were an annoying interruption to her morning ritual. "Teresa, it's the 21st century. We don't need to report our schedules to anyone." "I'm not asking you to report anything," I explained, feeling my forced calm begin to crack. "I'm just trying to have a normal conversation with my family." "Family," Ethan repeated with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mom, we've talked about this. We need to redefine the family dynamic. Roles have to evolve. Evolve. Another one of those modern words he used to make abandonment sound like progress. That afternoon, I decided to do something I hadn't done in months. I called my friend Rose, my best friend for life, Ethan's confirmation godmother. We had grown distant since I moved to Pasadena, not because of any fight or grudge, but because of the subtle way Jessica had suggested that my friends from the old neighborhood didn't fit in with their new lifestyle. "Teresa, it's a miracle you're calling," Rose exclaimed with that warm voice I had missed so much. "How are you, sweetie? How's my godson?" The simple question hit me like a punch to the gut. How was my son? How could I explain that I had lost him without him having died? "Fine, Rose. Everything's fine," I lied automatically. "How are you? How's the family?" Rose told me about her grandchildren, about her daughter's new job, about the trip she took with her sisters to Chicago. She spoke of a life full of real connections, shared laughter, and loud, warm family Sundays. "So when are you coming to visit?" she finally asked. "It's been too long since we've had a proper chat." The question caught me off guard. When was the last time I had gone out alone, for pleasure, to see a friend? "I don't know, Rose. It's complicated." "Complicated? Why? Are you sick?" "No, I'm not sick. It's just that Ethan and Jessica need me here." "What do they need you for, Teresa? Isn't Ethan 35 years old?" The question hung in the air like a soft but firm slap. Yes, Ethan was 35. He was a grown man, married with a successful company. What exactly did he need me at home for? "Well, someone has to look after the house," I replied weakly. "Look after the house from what? Don't they live there?" I didn't know what to say, because the truth was, I wasn't looking after the house from anything. I just cleaned, cooked, and tried to be invisible so as not to disturb their domestic harmony. After hanging up with Rose, I sat in the kitchen with a strange feeling in my chest. It was as if I had been holding my breath for years and was only now realizing that I was suffocating. That evening, Ethan came home late from work, as he often did lately. Jessica was at her yoga class, an activity she talked about constantly as if it were the key to spiritual enlightenment. Matthew had gone for a walk in the park, his new routine to manage his blood pressure. I found myself alone with my son for the first time in weeks. I decided to try for a real conversation, the kind we used to have when he still saw me as his mother, and not as a problem to be solved. "Ethan, can we talk for a moment?" He was getting a craft beer from the refrigerator, the kind that cost what I spent on groceries for 3 days. "What do you want to talk about, Mom?" "About us. About the family. About how we got to this point." "What do you mean, this point?" His tone was genuinely confused, as if there were nothing problematic about our current situation. "I mean, we don't talk anymore, Ethan. When I walk into a room where you are, you act like I'm in the way. For weeks, you've been treating me like a housekeeper you no longer need." "Mom, that's not true," he protested, but his voice sounded automatic, like he was reciting a script. "We respect you a lot. We just want everyone to have their own space." "My space where, son? In a nursing home?" "It's not a nursing home, Mom. I already explained. They're modern communities with all the amenities." "And why do you think I want amenities instead of family?" The question silenced him. He leaned against the refrigerator and drank his beer slowly, as if the alcohol could dissolve the discomfort of the moment. "Mom, it's not that I don't love you. It's just, things change. I'm not a kid anymore who needs his mom to make him breakfast." "I don't make you breakfast because I think you're a kid," I retorted, the words tumbling out faster than I could control them. "I do it because I love you. Because for 35 years, taking care of you has been my way of showing you how much you mean to me. But I don't need to be taken care of anymore, Mom." The sentence landed between us like a concrete slab. "I don't need to be taken care of anymore." "So, what do you need from me, son?" The question took him by surprise. He paused with the beer halfway to his lips, looking at me as if he were truly seeing me for the first time in months. I don't know. I guess nothing specific." Nothing specific. My son no longer needed anything specific from me. "Do you know what my mistake was, Ethan?" I asked with a calm that surprised me, thinking that love and need were the same thing, thinking that as long as you needed me, I would have a place in your life. "Mom, you're being dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic. I'm understanding." I stood up from the chair with slow but determined movements. "And you know what I'm understanding? That maybe you're right. Maybe it's time for me to evolve too." "What do you mean?" "I mean that for 5 years I have been waiting for your approval to exist in this house. I've been asking for permission to invite my sisters, to cook my favorite food, to watch TV, to laugh too loud. I have become a shadow of myself, trying not to disturb your perfect harmony." Ethan frowned, as if my words were a foreign language he couldn't decipher. "Mom, nobody asked you to do that." "Really?" The question was loaded with a bitterness that had been building for months. "You really think nobody asked me to become invisible? You decided to do all those things. Nobody forced you." "You're right," I admitted, feeling something release in my chest. "Nobody forced me. I chose to do it because I thought it was what you needed. Because I thought if I acted like the perfect mother-in-law and the perfect housekeeper, you would see me as the perfect mother and grandmother. But I've learned that it doesn't matter how hard I try to be perfect for you. I will always be too old, too traditional, too loud, too in the way." "Mom, that's not—" "Yes, it is, son. And that's okay. Because you know what I discovered today? That maybe the problem isn't that I get in the way of your perfect life. Maybe the problem is that you two have become too small to fit in mine." The sentence hung between us like smoke. Ethan opened his mouth to reply, but no words came out. "Good night, son," I said, walking towards the stairs. "Mom, wait." But I didn't wait. For the first time in 5 years, I didn't wait for him to process what he had just heard. I didn't wait for him to find an answer to justify the unjustifiable. I climbed the stairs feeling that each step took me further not just from the kitchen, but from the submissive woman desperate for approval that I had been for far too long. That night, lying next to a soundly sleeping Matthew, I took my phone and looked up the number for Auberge du Soleil in Napa Valley. It was midnight, but it didn't matter. Some decisions can't wait for sunrise. At 6 the next morning, I did something I hadn't done in 5 years. I didn't get up to make breakfast. I stayed in bed, listening to the morning sounds of the house as if I were a stranger. Ethan's hurried footsteps on the floor above, the sound of the shower, doors opening and closing with the mechanical routine of those who take for granted that someone else will handle the domestic details. At 7:15, I heard Ethan's steps coming down the stairs to the kitchen. Then, silence. Then, faster steps coming back up. "Mom," he called from the hallway. "Are you okay? Are you not coming down?" "I'm fine," I replied without moving from the bed. "I'm just resting." "But what about breakfast?" The question hung in the air, thick with genuine confusion, as if the possibility that he could make his own breakfast had never crossed his mind. "There's cereal in the pantry," I answered with the same calmness I would use to comment on the weather. "And bread for toast." Silence. Then, footsteps walking away. Half an hour later, I heard Jessica waking up with her usual routine. A meditation alarm with nature sounds, breathing exercises performed with exaggerated drama, and finally, her steps heading to the kitchen. "Ethan?" I heard her ask from downstairs. "Where's the coffee?" "I don't know. Mom didn't come down to make it." "Is she sick?" "She says she's just resting." "That's weird." Weird. As if a 69-year-old woman wanting to sleep in was an inexplicable phenomenon of nature. Matthew woke up at 8, as always. He looked at me curiously, seeing me still in bed, wide awake but with no intention of getting up. "Everything okay, my love?" "Everything's perfect," I answered, feeling surprisingly relaxed. "Do you know how long it's been since I stayed in bed past 6 in the morning?" Matthew thought for a moment. 5 years? 30 years, I corrected, since Ethan was a little boy and I had to get up early to get him ready for school. "And how does it feel?" "Liberating." I went down for breakfast at 10. The kitchen was a disaster. Dirty dishes in the sink, breadcrumbs on the counter, a spoon with jam abandoned on the marble I religiously cleaned every day. Ethan and Jessica had already left for work, leaving behind the chaos of people who have never had to clean up their own messes. Normally, my first impulse would have been to clean everything immediately, to restore the perfect order they expected to find upon their return. But that morning, I simply poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down to contemplate the mess as if it were a piece of modern art. Matthew came down shortly after and stared at the kitchen with a perplexed expression. "You're not going to clean? Why should I clean up the mess that other adults made?" The question took him by surprise. In 30 years of marriage, he had never heard me question my role as the automatic cleaner of family messes. "But you always have." "Yes," I admitted, taking a sip of my coffee. "I always have, and look where it got me." That afternoon, I made another revolutionary decision. I called the Auberge du Soleil and made a reservation for 2 for 1 week, using the credit card I kept for emergencies. My emergency was emotional, but that made it no less valid than a medical one. "A suite with a view of the valley?" the receptionist asked in a professional, warm voice. "The best one you have available," I replied, surprising myself with my own audacity. "Perfect. We have the presidential suite available for your requested dates. It includes a private terrace, butler service, and access to the premium spa. How much is it?" When she told me the price, I felt a moment of vertigo. It was more money than I had spent on myself in the last 5 years combined. But then, I thought of the $75,000 I had given Ethan without blinking when his company was in crisis. I thought of Matthew's $100,000 that had vanished into computer equipment. I thought of all the expensive gifts, all the free home-cooked meals, all the unpaid domestic services. "Perfect," I said. "I'll confirm the reservation." When Ethan and Jessica returned from work that evening, they found the kitchen exactly as they had left it. Dirty. I heard Jessica sigh dramatically from downstairs. "Teresa?" she called out. "Could you come down for a moment?" I came down unhurriedly, with the serenity of someone with nothing left to lose. "Yes? Can you please clean the kitchen?" I need to make my dinner. Of course, I replied with a smile that surprised them. As soon as you clean up the mess you made at breakfast, I'll clean up mine. Jessica blinked several times, as if her ears had played a trick on her. I'm sorry? Clean up your mess, and I'll clean up mine, I repeated with the same tranquility. It's only fair, don't you think? Teresa, you always handle the cleaning. Yes, I always have. But today I decided I'm done. Why? Because I am a guest in this house, not the hired help. The words came out with a crystalline clarity that stunned me. It was the first time in 5 years I had defined my status in this house with brutal honesty. You're my mother-in-law, Jessica stammered. Exactly. I am your mother-in-law, not your maid. Ethan appeared in the kitchen just in time to hear the exchange. His expression was a mixture of confusion and alarm, as if he were witnessing the collapse of a system that had worked perfectly for years. Mom, what's going on here? What's going on is that your wife wants me to clean up the mess she made, and I'm explaining to her that I'm not going to do it anymore. But you always— Yes, son, always. For 5 years, I have cleaned your messes, cooked your meals, washed your clothes, and kept your house impeccable as if it were my job. And this whole time, you've taken it for granted, as if it were my natural obligation instead of a favor I was doing out of love. Mom, you're exaggerating. Do you know how much it would have cost you to hire someone to do everything I've done for free for 5 years? I interrupted. Do you have any idea of the monetary value of a full-time cook, laundress, housekeeper, and house manager? The question left them speechless. They had never thought of my domestic labor in economic terms. To them, my work was invisible, automatic, part of the domestic landscape that simply existed without cost or effort. Over $5,000 a month, I continued, doing mental calculations I had never allowed myself to make before, multiplied by 60 months. You have saved over $300,000 in domestic services thanks to my unpaid labor. The numbers hung in the air like an uncomfortable revelation. Ethan opened his mouth to protest but couldn't find an argument. But Mom, you did it because you wanted to. I did it because I loved you, I corrected him. But you interpreted my love as free and unlimited availability. Jessica leaned against the kitchen island, clearly overwhelmed by a conversation that had taken an unexpected turn. So, what do you want us to do? I want you to start treating me like a human being with rights and dignity, not like an appliance you can use when it's convenient and put away when it's in your way. No one is treating you like an appliance, Ethan protested. Aren't you? I asked, the indignation that had been building for months finally finding its voice. Then why is it that when your friends come for dinner, I cook and serve but am not invited to sit at the table? Why can I clean your bathroom but can't use your expensive soap? Why can I wash your clothes but can't put mine in the same load? Each question was a soft but direct slap. I saw them exchange uncomfortable glances, as if they were seeing their own behavior from an outside perspective for the first time. Starting tomorrow, I announced with a calm that filled me with power, things are going to change. You will clean up your own messes, you will do your own laundry, you will cook your own food. And if you want me to participate in the household chores, you will ask me politely, not assume it's my obligation. And if we don't want to? Jessica asked with a defiant tone. I smiled for the first time in weeks. A smile that came from the depths of my liberated soul. Then you're going to find out just how much it costs to maintain a house without free help. That night, for the first time in 5 years, I ate only what I wanted to eat. I didn't cook for anyone else. I didn't set the table for 4. I didn't worry about balancing flavors to please other palates. I made myself a ham and cheese sandwich, poured a glass of cold water, and ate in the garden by the orange tree, watching the sunset that painted the Napa Valley sky in my imagination. The next 3 days were like living in a silent war zone. Ethan and Jessica moved through the house with the rigidity of soldiers in enemy territory, speaking in whispers and shooting me glances that wavered between resentment and perplexity. It was as if they had woken up one morning to find that their favorite home appliance had developed consciousness and rebelled against its programmed functions. The kitchen had become a domestic battlefield. Dirty dishes piled up in the sink like fallen soldiers. Crumbs conquered every available surface, and the smell of stale food began to waft through the house. Jessica tried to cook her own organic meals, but her culinary skills turned out to be as sophisticated as her personality, all style and no substance. On Tuesday night, while I was reading peacefully in the garden, I heard a heated argument coming from the kitchen. "Ethan, this is ridiculous," Jessica exclaimed in an exasperated voice. "I've been trying to make a simple salad for 2 hours and I can't find anything in this kitchen. Mom always took care of organizing everything," Ethan replied, his tone a mix of frustration and nostalgia. "I guess I never paid attention to where she kept things." "Well, where's the lettuce I bought yesterday? I swear I put it in the fridge." "It went bad," I intervened from the garden door, unable to resist observing the chaos they had created. "Leafy greens only last a couple of days if they're not washed and stored properly." They both looked at me as if I were an oracle who had just spoken ancient wisdom. "And how do you store them properly?" Jessica asked, a mix of desperation and wounded pride in her voice. "You wash them in cold water, dry them completely, wrap them in paper towels, and store them in perforated bags." I explained with the patience of a teacher explaining basic concepts. "You also have to check the temperature of the fridge and the humidity in the vegetable drawers." Jessica blinked several times, as if she had just learned about the existence of quantum physics. "You have to do all that just so lettuce doesn't go bad?" "All that and more," I confirmed. "Maintaining a home requires knowledge, experience, and time. A lot of time." The lesson in domestic reality continued on Wednesday, when Ethan came down for breakfast wearing a wrinkled, stained shirt. His usually impeccable appearance showed the effects of 3 days without professional laundry service. "Mom?" he asked timidly as I drank my morning coffee. "Do you know why my white shirt came out of the washer pink?" "Because you washed it with something red," I answered without looking up from the newspaper I was reading with unusual calm. "But isn't the washing machine supposed to separate things automatically?" The question was so naive it was almost endearing. Almost. "No, son. Washing machines wash what you put inside. If you mix colors, the colors get mixed. If you use hot water on delicate fabrics, they shrink. If you use too much detergent, it leaves a residue. If you use too little, things don't get clean. And how am I supposed to know all that?" "The same way I learned it," I replied, finally looking him directly in the eye. "By practicing, making mistakes, and asking someone with more experience." "Can you teach me?" The question hung between us, heavy with a vulnerability I hadn't heard in his voice since he was a teenager. For a moment, my mother's heart softened, ready to run and rescue him as I had thousands of times before. But then I remembered the words he had said to me in the garden 3 weeks earlier. "It's time for you to disappear. I can teach you," I said slowly, "but it's going to cost you." "Cost me?" "Money? Not money. Respect." The word landed between us like a stone in a pond, creating ripples that spread across the entire emotional space we shared. "What do you mean?" "I mean that if you want me to teach you how to run a house, you're going to have to treat me like a teacher, not like a favor you can take for granted. You're going to have to ask me nicely, you're going to have to thank me, and you're going to have to acknowledge that the knowledge I have has value." Ethan fell silent, processing an emotional transaction he had never had to consider before. On Thursday morning, everything changed for good. I woke up to the sound of the phone ringing insistently downstairs. It was 6:30 in the morning, too early for social calls. I went down in my robe and slippers to find Ethan already on the phone, dressed in a suit that he had clearly pulled straight from the washer without ironing. "Yes, I understand," he was saying, his voice tense. "But is there any way to extend the deadline? We've had some domestic setbacks." Domestic setbacks. That's what they were calling my rebellion now. "Who was that?" I asked when he hung up. "A major client," he replied, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "I have a crucial presentation at 9 this morning, and I can't go like this." Indeed, his appearance was a disaster. A wrinkled shirt, pants with a stain that looked like ketchup, unpolished shoes, and a tie that looked like it had been slept on. "And can't Jessica help you?" Jessica already left for her meditation retreat in Ojai. She goes every Thursday and comes back on Sunday. Of course. Jessica had time for 4-day spiritual retreats, but not to learn how to maintain her own home. "Mom, Ethan continued in a voice I hadn't heard in years. Please, help me this one time. This contract could mean the difference between my company growing or having to shut it down. The plea was genuine. For the first time in months, my son was truly asking for my help, not just assuming I would automatically provide it. Please, he repeated. I promise that afterward we can talk about everything. About what you need, what you want. But right now, I really need your help. I looked at my son, this grown man who had managed to build a successful company but didn't know how to iron a shirt. Who could manage million-dollar budgets but couldn't sort laundry? Who could give sophisticated business presentations but couldn't cook an egg without burning it? All right, I said finally, but on my terms. Anything you want? First condition, you ask me for things with please, and you say thank you afterward. Please, Mom, will you help me? And thank you so much. Second condition, you acknowledge that what I am doing has value. It is not an automatic favor. It is a professional service that I am choosing to provide you. I completely acknowledge that. Third condition, when Jessica gets back, the three of us are going to have an honest conversation about how this house is going to be run from now on. Ethan nodded vigorously. I went up to my room, and within 30 minutes I had selected a clean suit for him, ironed a shirt to perfection, polished his shoes, and tied his tie so it looked like it was straight out of a men's fashion magazine. I also made him a full breakfast and packed him a lunch in a smart-looking container. When I was done, Ethan looked like the successful executive he truly was. He looked at himself in the foyer mirror, and for a moment I saw something in his expression that had been missing for months. Genuine gratitude. Thanks, Mom, he said, hugging me with a warmth I hadn't felt since we were a real family. Really, I don't know what I would have done without you. You would have learned to do it yourself, I replied, but without any harshness. And maybe that would have been for the best. That evening, when Ethan returned from work, he came bearing flowers and a bottle of wine that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. How did the presentation go? Perfectly, he replied with a genuine smile. We got the contract, and a large part of it was thanks to you. Thanks to me? Yes, because you made me realize that for years I have been taking something invaluable for granted. Your knowledge, your experience, your willingness to help. I've treated it like it was free and automatic, when in reality, it's a gift that you choose to give me. The words sounded sincere, but I had learned to be wary of emotional promises made in moments of crisis. I'm very glad you've realized that, son. But words are easy. What really matters is how you're going to act from now on. You're right, and that's why I want to propose something. He took an elegant folder from his briefcase and spread it on the dining room table. This is the deed to the house, he explained. I want to add your name and Dad's as owners, not as guests, as legal owners. The proposal took me completely by surprise. For 5 years, our residence in that house had been a revocable courtesy. Now he was offering me permanent legal security. Why? I asked, suspicious of gifts that arrived after a crisis. Because I realized that you aren't guests in this house. You are the reason this house exists. Without your money for the down payment, without the support you've given me for years, I wouldn't have been able to build any of what I have. The words sounded good. Too good. And does Jessica agree with this? The question made Ethan avert his gaze for a moment. Jessica is going to have to understand that some things are going to change. Something in his tone alerted me. There was a tension there that suggested difficult conversations had yet to happen. What aren't you telling me, Ethan? Ethan looked down, and his fingers began to drum nervously on the dining room table, a habit from his childhood when he had something difficult to confess. It's just, over the last few days while you weren't doing the housework, Jessica and I had several arguments. What kind of arguments? She thinks you're emotionally manipulating us. That you're using your age and your position as a mother to force us to treat you in a special way. The words hit me like a cold slap. For 5 years, I had made myself a shadow so as not to bother them, worked for free as their housekeeper, asked permission to even invite my own sisters over. And now it turned out I was the manipulative one. And what do you think? I asked, keeping my voice steady even though my heart was racing. I think she doesn't understand what family means. For Jessica, relationships are transactions. If someone doesn't provide direct, immediate value, they shouldn't take up space in her life. And that's why you want to put the house in our names? To protect us from her? Ethan sighed deeply. Partly, yes, but also because I realized she was right about one thing. You have been in a vulnerable position this whole time. If something happened to me, if she and I got divorced, you would be left literally on the street. The admission filled me with a strange mix of relief and terror. Relief because my son finally recognized our vulnerability. Terror because it meant that vulnerability had been real all along. When is Jessica coming back from her retreat? Tomorrow night. And have you talked to her about this? About the deed? I told her I was considering it. She got furious. Of course she got furious. Sharing legal ownership of the house would mean she could no longer kick us out on a whim, that we would have legal rights to be respected, that her perfect domestic kingdom would have to include subjects with voting power. Ethan, I really appreciate the gesture, but I don't want to be the cause of problems in your marriage. Mom, you are not the cause of anything. The problems were already there. These past few days have helped me see things I've been ignoring for years. That night, I ate dinner with a peace I hadn't felt in weeks. Ethan had cooked for us, a simple but edible pasta, and we talked like we hadn't in months. He told me about his work, about his dreams of expanding the company, about his fears of not being successful enough. I told him about my youth, about the sacrifices his father and I had made to give him an education, about the dreams we had postponed to prioritize his. It was like getting my son back after years of gradual loss. But the peace lasted exactly until 9 o'clock on Friday night, when Jessica returned from her spiritual retreat with the aura of a Zen warrior ready for battle. She arrived carrying bags of ridiculously expensive organic produce, and wearing that serene but dangerous expression people adopt when they've meditated long enough to morally justify their worst impulses. Ethan, she said without even greeting me, we need to talk. Jessica, first say hello to my mom. Hello, Teresa, she muttered without looking at me, in the same tone she would use to acknowledge a piece of furniture she disliked but tolerated. They locked themselves in their bedroom for 2 hours. I heard them arguing in low voices, but occasionally the tones would rise enough for single words to reach me. Manipulation, emotional blackmail, boundaries, respect. When they came down, they both had the tense expressions of people who have fought a battle with no clear winner. Teresa, Jessica began in an artificially calm voice, I think we need to clarify a few things. Perfect, I replied, feeling more prepared for this conversation than I had for any other in months. Let's clarify. Over the past few days, I've been reflecting a lot on our family dynamics. At my retreat, I worked with a coach who specializes in intergenerational relationships, and we came to some very interesting conclusions. Of course, she had paid a professional to tell her that I was the problem. What conclusions? That what is happening here is a very common pattern in codependent families, where parents use guilt and filial obligation to maintain control over their adult children's lives. The words were delivered with the clinical precision of someone who has rehearsed a psychological diagnosis. Excuse me? I managed to articulate. My coach explained that when parents refuse to accept that their children have grown up, they often resort to emotional sabotage, like suddenly stopping the things they've always done, to create a crisis that makes them feel needed again. The interpretation was so twisted that for a moment, I was speechless. My rebellion against years of mistreatment had been reframed as psychological manipulation. Jessica, Ethan intervened uncomfortably. I don't think it's that simple. Ethan, you're too kind to see the toxic dynamics, his wife interrupted him. That's why you need an objective outside perspective. An objective outside perspective? I repeated, feeling the indignation rise in my throat. You mean a coach who doesn't know me? Has never lived in this house, and knows nothing about the 5 years I've spent working for you for free? That kind of comment is exactly what confirms the diagnosis, Jessica replied with a condescending smile. The victim mentality, the recounting of sacrifices, the blame shifting. I am not playing the victim. I am stating facts. Your perception of the facts is filtered through unhealthy emotional patterns. The conversation had taken a surreal turn. I was being turned into the family's mental patient for the simple crime of wanting to be treated with dignity. You know what, Jessica? I said, standing up with a calm that surprised me. You're right. Both she and Ethan looked at me in shock. You're right that I have unhealthy patterns. My unhealthy pattern is accepting disrespect for years. My unhealthy pattern is working for free for people who don't appreciate my effort. My unhealthy pattern is asking for permission to exist in spaces that I myself helped create. Teresa, I'm not finished. I cut her off, feeling years of unspoken words finally find their way out. My most unhealthy pattern of all has been believing that if I sacrificed enough, if I made myself small enough, if I served well enough, you would love me the way I love you. No one said we don't love you, Ethan mumbled. Didn't you? Then why, a month ago, did you tell me to get lost? We didn't say get lost. You said exactly that, Ethan. You used that exact phrase. Silence stretched for several minutes. Jessica shifted uncomfortably, clearly unprepared for such a direct confrontation. Well, she said finally, perhaps the wording was unfortunate, but the point remains valid. We need space to build our own family. Your own family? I asked. Since when does family mean exclusion instead of inclusion? Since we evolved beyond archaic, codependent family structures, she replied, with the tone of someone quoting a self-help manual. Do you know what really hurts me? I continued, looking directly at my son. It's not that you want your space. It's that never, in 5 years, did you bother to ask me what I needed. You never cared if I was happy here, if I felt valued, if I had my own plans. What plans could you possibly have at your age? Jessica asked without thinking. The question hung in the air like a time bomb. Even Ethan looked at her in horror. Excuse me? I whispered. Jessica immediately realized her mistake, but it was too late. The words were out, revealing what she truly thought of me. I didn't mean, what plans could I have at my age? I repeated, feeling each word fill with a dignity that had been buried under years of submission. Do you mean what plans could a 69-year-old woman have who is still lucid, healthy, and has many years ahead of her? Teresa, do you mean what plans could someone have who raised your husband, who paid for this house, who kept your home running for 5 years? Mom, she didn't mean… Yes, she did, Ethan, I interrupted, my gaze locked on Jessica. She meant exactly that. That at my age I should no longer have dreams, plans, or aspirations. That I should just be grateful that you tolerate me until I die. Jessica opened her mouth to protest, but I was done listening. I walked up to my room with firm steps and pulled out the suitcases that had remained open for weeks, as if my subconscious had known this moment would come. As I packed, I heard Ethan and Jessica arguing downstairs. He was trying to mediate. She was insisting I was being dramatic. The sounds of their conflict filtered through the walls like the distant echo of a life that no longer belonged to me. When I finished packing, I came down with my suitcases and found Ethan alone in the living room, his head in his hands. Where are you going? He asked without looking up. To get lost, I replied with a smile that came from my soul. Just like you wanted. Mom, please, we can fix this. No, son, we can't fix it anymore. Because to fix something, both sides have to want to mend it. And you don't want to mend it. You want to control it. That's not true. Yes, it is. And that's okay. It's natural. It's how it should be. Children grow up, start their own families, and prioritize their partners over their parents. But that doesn't mean I have to lose you. You're not going to lose me, I assured him, stroking his head like I did when he was a boy. You're just going to find me in a different place. A place where I don't need permission to exist. That night, Matthew and I checked into a hotel near the airport. Early the next day, we would be flying to Napa Valley, to the suite with a view of the vineyards that I had booked in an act of desperation that now felt like the first step toward my freedom. But just when I thought I had hit rock bottom, when I believed they couldn't hurt me anymore, the universe had one last devastating surprise in store. At 5 a.m, my phone rang like an emergency alarm. It was my sister, Hope, and the panic in her voice woke me completely. Teresa, have you seen social media? Have you seen what Ethan posted? What? No, I was sleeping. What's wrong? "Oh, sis, it's horrible. I can't believe your own son would do this." With trembling hands, I opened Facebook on my phone. The first post in my feed was from Ethan, published at 3 in the morning. It had a picture of me from 5 years ago, when I still smiled genuinely, alongside a text that made my blood run cold. "With a broken heart, I have to share a very difficult situation we're going through. My parents, who have always been the center of my life, have decided to abandon us at the most challenging time in our marriage. Jessica and I are going through a serious financial crisis. My company is on the verge of bankruptcy, and she just lost her job. But instead of supporting us as a family, they have chosen to leave. They've said very hurtful things, refused to live with us, and are now going on a luxury vacation while we struggle to survive. I don't understand how parents can turn their backs on their children when they're needed most. It hurts when the people who taught you about family are the first to break it. Family, shock heartbreak, should disappointment." The post had over 300 comments and had been shared 50 times. The reactions were a mix of broken hearts, angry faces, and comments of support directed at Ethan. What disappointing parents. Children should always be the priority. In times of crisis, families should stick together more than ever. I don't get how parents can be so selfish. Your mom looks like such a sweet person in the photo. I can't believe she's so cruel on the inside. Every comment was a stab wound. Ethan had constructed a completely false narrative where he was the abandoned victim, and I was the cruel mother who was running away from her family responsibilities. He had omitted 5 years of emotional abuse, invented a non-existent financial crisis, and turned my search for dignity into heartless abandonment. "Teresa, are you still there?" Hope asked over the phone. "Yes, I'm here," I murmured, tears blurring my vision. "I can't believe he did this. The whole community is talking about it. People are so angry with you. Mrs. Gable from church stopped me at the store and told me what a shame it was to have such a terrible mother for a sister." The pain multiplied exponentially. I hadn't just lost my son and my home. Now I had also lost my reputation, my place in the community, the respect of people who had known me for decades. Matthew woke up to my sobs. When I showed him the post, his face transformed into a mask of pain and fury I had never seen before. "How could he do this?" he asked, his voice cracking. "How could he lie like that about his own mother?" "He's not lying completely," I whispered through tears. "It's true that we're going on a trip while he has problems. It's true we refuse to live with them. Teresa, you know that's not the whole story, but it's the story he's telling, and it's the story people are going to believe." My phone began to ring non-stop. Calls from relatives, neighbors, acquaintances from church, some with genuine concern, others with morbid curiosity, others clearly to scold me for my cruelty toward my son. The one that hurt the most was the call from my niece, Ashley, my sister Connie's daughter, who had always been like a daughter to me. "Aunt Teresa," she said in a cold voice. "I just spoke with Ethan. He told me what's happening. Ashley, honey, things aren't how he's telling them. Auntie, I've always looked up to you, but I can't understand how you can go on a luxury trip while your son is going through such hard times. You always taught us that family comes first. Sweetheart, listen to me. Your cousin is not in a financial crisis. His company is thriving. He just landed a huge contract. He was the one who kicked us out of his house. Auntie, I know that seniors sometimes perceive things differently. Ethan explained how you misinterpreted a normal conversation about independence. Misinterpreted? My own son had convinced the family that my perception of reality was distorted by age. I hung up the phone feeling as though I had lost not only my son, but my entire extended family. I decided to write my own version of events on Facebook. With trembling fingers, I drafted a long, detailed response, explaining the 5 years of unpaid domestic labor, the constant demands, the disrespect, the moment he told us to get lost. I even uploaded photos of the bank transfer receipts for the money we had given him over the years. But when I posted my version, the reactions were devastating. The comments painted my explanation as the justifications of a resentful mother, a classic case of parents who can't let go of their kids, and toxic victimization from the older generation. Ethan's narrative had gotten there first, and on social media, The first version is the one that sticks in the collective consciousness. My truth sounded like excuses. The public humiliation was the final blow that broke something deep inside me. I had not only lost my son and my home, I had lost my public identity, my place in the community, the story of who I was and what I had done with my life. Matthew, I said that morning as we packed in silence, I think Ethan just committed character assassination. What do you mean? I mean the woman I was for 69 years no longer exists. The Teresa everyone knew, who had a good reputation, who was respected as a mother and a wife. That woman died last night with that post. Teresa, and you know what's strange? I feel free. Matthew looked at me, confused. Free because I have nothing left to lose. I no longer have to protect my reputation. I no longer have to worry about what people think. I no longer have to maintain the image of the perfect mother. I walked over to the hotel mirror and truly looked at myself for the first time in years. I saw a 69-year-old woman who had survived the death of her parents, raised a son, worked for decades, built and lost homes, loved and been betrayed. I am no longer Ethan's mother, I said to my reflection. I am no longer Jessica's mother-in-law. I am no longer the good sister from the neighborhood. I am no longer the respectable lady from church. Then who are you? Matthew asked softly. I turned to him with a smile that came from a very deep place, a place I hadn't visited in decades. I'm Teresa Miller. I'm 69 years old. I have money in the bank, health in my body, and for the first time in my adult life, I have no obligations to anyone but myself. And what is Teresa Miller going to do now? Teresa Miller is going to get on a plane to Napa Valley, sit on a terrace overlooking the vineyards, order the most expensive meal on the menu, and toast to her own resurrection. At 2 p.m, while we were waiting at the airport, my phone rang one last time. It was Ethan. Mom, please don't leave like this. People are misinterpreting my post. They aren't misinterpreting it, son. I replied with a calm that surprised me. They're understanding it exactly the way you wanted them to. That's not true. I was just hurt, confused. We can fix this. No, Ethan. We can't fix anything anymore. Because to fix something, both parties have to want to mend it. And you don't want to mend it. You want to control it. Mom, you're my mother. You'll always be my mother. Yes, I admitted, the words coming out clean and clear. I will always be your mother. But I will no longer be your victim. I hung up the phone and turned it off completely. Ready to disappear? Matthew asked, taking my hand. Ready to reappear, I corrected him. In a place where no one knows my old story. In a place where I can write a new one. The plane took off from Los Angeles at 5 p.m. From my window, I watched the city shrink until it became a distant memory. I didn't know what awaited me in Napa Valley, but for the first time in decades, that uncertainty didn't scare me. It gave me hope. The Auberge du Soleil in Napa Valley turned out to be everything I had imagined, and more than I had dared to dream. The presidential suite had floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the rolling vineyards as if they were a living painting that changed color with the hours of the day. The private terrace was larger than the living room of the Pasadena house, furnished with white sofas so comfortable they felt like clouds, and a glass table where the reflection of the sun created tiny rainbows. When the bellhop finished showing me all the suite's amenities, the soaking tub with a view, the rainfall shower, the minibar stocked with French champagne, the 24-hour butler service, I was left alone amidst all that luxury, feeling something I hadn't experienced in decades. Complete freedom. What would you like for dinner tonight, Mrs. Miller? Asked Carmen, the guest services manager, a woman in her 40s with a genuine smile and professional yet warm manners. It was the first time in 5 years that someone had asked me what I wanted, without assuming my answer would depend on the preferences of others. What do you recommend? I asked, feeling the strange excitement of being able to choose based solely on my own tastes. The chef has a special tasting menu featuring local ingredients. Dungeness crab bisque, pan-seared scallops, and local salmon with farm-to-table vegetables, all prepared for a private viewing from your terrace. That sounds perfect, I replied, without asking the price, without calculating a budget, without worrying if someone else would approve of my choice. That first night in Napa, Sitting on my private terrace with a glass of white wine while I waited for dinner, I did something I hadn't done in years. I simply existed. I didn't have to cook for anyone. I didn't have to clean anything. I didn't have to ask permission to take up space or make noise. The silence was mine. The views were mine. The decisions were completely mine. Matthew had decided to stay in the room, still processing the pain of Ethan's betrayal. But I felt something different. Not pain, but a strange sense of lightness, as if I had been carrying an invisible weight for decades and had finally allowed myself to put it down. Dinner arrived like a small ceremony. 3 waiters set up an elegant table on my terrace with scented candles, fresh flowers, and china so fine I was afraid to touch it. The food was prepared with a delicacy I had never experienced. Each bite was an explosion of flavors that reminded me that food could be art, not just fuel. "Is everything to your liking, madam?" asked the chef, a young man with bright eyes who clearly loved his work. "It's exquisite," I answered honestly. "May I ask you something?" "Of course. How long have you been cooking?" 15 years. I studied at the Culinary Institute of America, worked in restaurants in San Francisco, and then decided to come back to Napa to cook with local ingredients. His passion was evident in every word. He reminded me of myself at 20, when I believed the world was full of infinite possibilities. "Do you ever regret coming back instead of staying in a big city?" "Never," he replied without hesitation. "Because here I can cook with my heart, not just with technique. I can use the herbs from my grandmother's garden, the produce from local farms, the bread from the artisan baker down the road." "Is your grandmother still alive?" "Yes, she's 82. She taught me that cooking is a way of loving. Every dish I make carries some of her wisdom." After he left, I kept thinking about his words. For 30 years, I had cooked as a way of loving. But at some point, that expression of love had turned into an obligation, an unrecognized service, an invisible job. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in months. I didn't wake up worrying about anyone else's breakfast. I didn't hear footsteps on the stairs that reminded me of my domestic duties. I didn't feel the pressure to be useful to justify my existence. The next day, I decided to explore the hotel grounds. I walked along a path through the vineyards with slow steps, feeling the warm sun on my skin, listening to the hypnotic sound of the wind rustling through the leaves like a natural meditation. It was the first time in years I had walked for pleasure, with no specific destination, no agenda to fulfill. On my walk, I met Elena, a 73-year-old woman from Madrid who was in Napa celebrating her recent divorce. 45 years of marriage, she told me as we shared a glass of Chardonnay under an olive tree. 45 years of being the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect hostess, until one day I woke up and didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. Her story resonated in my soul like an echo. "Aren't you afraid of being alone?" I asked her. At first, yes. But then I discovered something wonderful, that being alone is not the same as being abandoned. Being alone can be a choice, a gift you give yourself. Elena had been traveling solo through the U.S. for 3 months. She had been in Santa Fe learning pottery, in the Berkshires taking painting classes, and in New Orleans learning to dance Zydeco. "Do you know what's the most incredible part?" she said with sparkling eyes. "At 73, I'm discovering who I really am, beyond the roles I played for others for decades." That afternoon, inspired by Elena's story, I decided to do something completely out of character. I signed up for a gourmet Californian cooking class offered by the hotel, not to cook for others, but to learn something new, for the simple pleasure of creating. The instructor, Chef Alejandro, was 60 years old and had a culinary philosophy that immediately captivated me. "Cooking," he explained to the 6 of us in the class, "is not just technique. It is memory, it is culture, it is a way of telling the story of who we are." For 3 hours, I learned to prepare dishes that were completely new to me, using local ingredients, blending flavors and combinations that challenged everything I thought I knew about cooking. My hands, which for decades had prepared the same family recipes, were now experimenting with new flavors, modern techniques, artistic presentations. "Mrs. Miller," Alejandro said to me as I carefully plated a dish, "you have the hands of an experienced cook. Have you worked in a professional kitchen?" "No," I replied, feeling a strange pride in my newly recognized skills. I've only cooked for my family for 30 years. 30 years of daily experience is more training than many professional chefs have, he observed. Have you ever thought about doing something different with that experience? The question planted a seed in my mind that I didn't know was waiting to germinate. That night, as I ate the meal I had prepared with my own hands, a complex and sophisticated dish that tasted different from anything I had ever cooked before, I had an epiphany that changed me forever. For decades, I had viewed my culinary knowledge as a domestic skill, useful for family maintenance but without real value in the outside world. It had never occurred to me that 30 years of daily experience in cooking, nutrition, home economics, and budget management constituted valuable professional training. I took out my phone and, for the first time in weeks, opened social media. But instead of looking for the hurtful comments on Ethan's post, I created a completely new profile. Not as Teresa Miller, the abandoned mother and problematic mother-in-law, but as Teresa Miller, a home chef with 30 years of experience, specializing in traditional American comfort food and home management. I uploaded photos of the dishes I had prepared in class, wrote about my rediscovered passion for cooking as an art form, and for the first time in my adult life, I talked about myself without defining myself in relation to others. The comments that started to arrive were completely different from the ones I had received under my old identity. People asking for recipes, complimenting my photos, taking an interest in my culinary story. Matthew, I said that night as we were getting ready for bed, I think I just discovered who I am when no one is telling me who I have to be. And who are you? He asked tenderly. I am a 69-year-old woman who is just beginning her real life. On the fourth day in Napa, I received a message on my new profile that changed my perspective forever. It was from a woman named Patricia, 58, from Portland. Teresa, I saw your photos and your story, and I wanted to tell you something. I went through a similar situation with my family. After years of serving everyone, I decided to start my own home catering business. Now I have 12 employees. I cater events for 300 people. And I've turned everything I learned as a homemaker into a thriving company. If you ever want to talk about how to monetize your experience, I would love to help. I read the message 5 times, feeling how each word opened up possibilities I had never considered before. I couldn't just survive without being my family's free housekeeper. I could thrive by being an independent professional who charged for her skills. That night, sitting on my terrace while I looked at the brightest stars I had ever seen, I made a mental list of everything I knew how to do: cook for large groups, manage household budgets, organize family events, handle food and supply inventories, negotiate with vendors at the farmer's market, create balanced and economical menus, and manage multiple tasks simultaneously under pressure. It was an impressive resume that I had devalued for decades, considering it just domestic knowledge. For the first time since leaving Los Angeles, I called my sister Hope. Teresa, where are you? Everyone is asking about you. I'm fine, sis. Better than fine. I'm being reborn. Reborn? What do you mean? I mean, for the first time in my life, I'm living for myself. And it's glorious. I told her about the cooking class, the new friends I had made, the business ideas I was exploring. But Teresa, she interrupted with concern, don't you miss your home? Don't you miss Ethan? You know what I discovered, Hope? I replied with a clarity that surprised me. That home isn't a place where they tolerate you. Home is where they value you. And Ethan, I will always love him, but I will no longer beg for a love that I have to buy with my dignity. That night, as the vineyard breeze rustled the curtains of my suite, I knew with absolute certainty that my real life had just begun.